All right, so spaced repetition. You now are spaced repetition pros after doing that quizzes together. Here's the formal definition. Spaced repetition means spacing out your studying over weeks. It is best to review something just before you're about to forget it. So the brain has to work hard to remember. This strengthens the long-term memory of that fact. So this is a little weird. We might think that we don't want to give our brains time to forget. We might say, oh, we should review something every single day to make sure that we never forget it. But in fact, it has to be timed to get the maximal learning. We want to space things out so that our brain is just starting to forget it. So it has to work a little bit harder. So why is spaced repetition so effective, and when should you test yourself? Well, take a look at the forgetting curve here. Ignore the green lines for now. Take a look at the red line. And we talked about this a little bit, but not too much. So what does this represent? Well, we've got memory, and then we've got time remembered. So the memory starts off really high, and then it seems to decrease. So what could this red line represent? The red line is the forgetting curve. This represents our memory starting off when we learn a new fact. That memory is up to 100% because we just learned it. Then 24 hours later, one day later, it's dropped to about 50%. So we're pretty 50-50 to, are we even going to remember it? We've probably forgotten about half of what we've learned. After 2 days, we've forgotten even more. And by the time we get to even less than a week, just 6 days, we've forgotten most of what we've learned. We've forgotten most of what we've learned if we don't review. Now, of course, as teachers, well, we're reviewing stuff with our students all the time. When they do homework, that's review. When we give them a quiz, that's review. But it's still something to keep in mind. And okay, so we know, well, obviously reviewing is important, but when should we be reviewing? When should students be using active recall and testing themselves? Well, let's take a look at those green lines now. So this is what happens if we don't review the information. It starts off at 100%, and then after 6 days, it's pretty low. You probably don't remember much at all. And adults work this way as well. It's not just kids. However, the first green line here shows what happens when you review after 1 day. So, okay, we've forgotten. Okay, now it's 24 hours later. It's the next day, and we have now reviewed it. Yay! Maybe they reread their notes. Maybe they took a quiz. Maybe you went over it with them in class. And their memory is at 100% again. Yay! Okay, they know the fact again. But we can see, well, it's still going down, 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 down. And again, after 6 days, it's pretty low. So that's not great, but thankfully there's another green line. Woohoo! So what does this represent? Well, this represents they've reviewed it again. It's now day 2, and they reviewed it the day after, and now they reviewed it again the next day as well. And so, yay, it's back at 100%, but it does keep decreasing. And now they've reviewed it the 3rd day as well. And again, it's back at 100%. And notice something about the slope of these lines. What's happening to the slope of the forgetting curve the more days we review it? Well, it seems to be decreasing, right? This red line had a really steep slope. It was like when we first learned something, if we don't review it, we forget everything like immediately. And then we reviewed it once, and the slope was still kind of steep, but less so. But by the time we get to the 3rd day that we've reviewed something 3 times, this slope doesn't really look like it's going towards 0. I mean, it eventually would get there, but it's really flattening out quite a lot, which is great, which means we don't need to review the same information every single day forever. But what we do want to do is we want to review the information 3 times, 3 days rather. And then after that, we can take some time off. Then we can take a week, take 2 weeks and review it then. Well, when this starts to actually get pretty low after a few weeks. And this kind of makes sense logically as well, that our brains would say, if we've done something 3 days in a row, that's probably something that we're going to use fairly regularly. So our brains say, all right, great, fine, let's remember it then. Whereas if we only review something 1 day, our brains kind of feel like, well, okay, I guess we needed it that one time we learned it, and then we needed it one other time, but it doesn't seem that important. But when we do it 3 days in a row of review, our brain's saying, all right, fine, let's just remember this. Let's not decrease our memory. If we want to think about the bridge metaphor, at this point, the bridge is really strong. So you don't need to review it every day. You just need to review it in a week or two. Okay, so again, pause the video, take 3 minutes to do a brain dump. Don't look at any previous notes, just write down everything you remember so far that we just talked about. With spaced repetition, quizzes, all that good stuff. Pause the video, and then we'll go on. Okay, now I want you to do the same thing that you did before. Using the brain dump that you just wrote, turn that into a study guide with at least 3 questions. So you can turn them into true or false. You could say like true or false. Spaced repetition means you study a bunch of times the day before the test. And we'd say, oh no, that's false. It's about spacing it not just the day before, but like weeks before. So that would be a study guide question. Or you could just do fill in the blanks where you literally just rewrite your notes, but you turn some into blanks. Obviously, don't share them in chat. We are asynchronous today. So pause the video while you do that study guide. All right, and again, reflect on how you can use this. Write down 1 to 3 ideas of how you can use what you've learned so far. Maybe you want to use quizzes as a homework assignment. Maybe you want to give little like quick quizzes at the beginning of class to review older content to make sure you get that memory back up to 100%.